Instead, him being Donald Trump turns around and says, guess what? Russia fought really hard for this land and they called dibs. So we're going to give it to them.
He could be at a turning point in the war in Ukraine. President Trump says that he and Vladimir Putin have agreed to start negotiating the end of the conflict. After speaking with Trump, Ukraine's president says no one wants peace more than Ukraine. Nancy Cordes is at the White House with the latest on this. Nancy, good morning. A lot of people are wondering if President Zelensky is involved in these conversations with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin.
Right, and President Trump left some question about that yesterday in the Oval Office, Gail. He did say he is serious about brokering a peace deal to end the war, but he also suggested Ukraine would have to make some big concessions and give up some territory, even though it was Russia that invaded unprovoked 3 years ago.
I, Tulsi Gabbard, do solemnly swear.
At the swearing-in for his new director of national intelligence, President Trump said he and Russian President Vladimir Putin have big plans to meet and start negotiating.
We expect
they're kicking the press out so they can make out, so they can kiss. All right, let's get back to Trump and Pootie Poo.
That he'll come here and I'll go there, and we're going to meet also probably in Saudi Arabia.
Russian troops currently control about 20% of Ukrainian territory. Trump suggested Russia deserves to keep some of it as part of any deal.
They took a lot of land. And
Russia deserves to keep a little bit of land. Come on, guys. Once again, ridiculous statement being said openly. The quiet part out loud. That's it.
And they fought for that land and they lost a lot of...
I like that he's presenting it as a pro-Russian position. Like, he's saying it like, well, you know, they fought hard for that land. They deserve to keep it, which is a ridiculous way to communicate what's going on. And the obvious way to communicate what's going on would be, yeah, if you want to end this, endless conflict where people are dying nonstop, then you're going to have to make concessions. I can't control Vladimir Putin. He's a foreign adversary. And we're going to try to make sure that we have the best possible deal for the Ukrainians. But instead, because he's Trump, he's just like, they fought. Fair is fair. They fought long and hard. At least he stays consistent being pro-Russia and pro-Israel. I mean, true. He's like, yeah, might is right, folks. Mass take, you clearly don't have any respect for the long-lived institution of finders keepers. Yeah. Like, he could just be like, listen, it's a meat grinder. And the incredible amount of territorial seizure that Russia engaged in is completely unjustifiable, but there's nothing I can do about it. At the end of the day, you know, I don't want more Ukrainians than I do you. That could be a reasonable position that he could arrive at. Instead, him being Donald Trump turns around and says, guess what? Russia fought really hard for this land and they called dibs. So we're going to give it to them.
They lost a lot of...
It was a big shift from his predecessor's public position.
I want to be very clear about this. The United States will never recognize Russia's claims on Ukraine's sovereign territory.
Speaking in Brussels, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth dealt another blow to Ukraine's ambitions.
The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement.
Like, this is not a blow. That's not a blow at all. That's just a reaffirmation of the truth. It's like if you presented Anthony Blinken coming out and saying that Taiwan is a part of China, which is the long-standing American position, okay? And then being like, this is a real blow to the liberatory efforts in Taiwan. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, I hate Pete Hegseth, but him mentioning that as the official position is not a change in our commitment. That's not, it's ridiculous.
Democratic Senator Chris Coons argued all of this hurts Ukraine's bargaining position.
Secretary Hegseth should reread The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump because it is the worst possible negotiation.
Yeah, I think they're mostly angry on the aesthetic grounds. Like, look, walks back his statement yesterday that a negotiated settlement is not likely to end Ukraine and NATO. These negotiations are led by real Donald Trump. Everything is on the table in his conversations with Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. What he decides to allow or not is at the purview of the leader of the free world, President Trump. So I'm not going to stand at this podium and declare what President Trump what President Trump will do or won't do, what will be in or what will be out, what concessions will be made or what concessions are not made. But him openly stating that at most is causing anger and division amongst the national security apparatus, because they're like, well, why are you saying it out loud? That's it. Even though they have said it on numerous occasions through both back channels and also openly to the media. Donald Trump has also said that, and so have previous administrations as well.
To give away two of the most important deal points before they even start negotiations.
Trump's new Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, did send a pro-Ukraine message while meeting in Kyiv with President Vladimir Zelensky.
We believe.
Sometimes it feels like liberals want the administration to lie to them. You know what I mean? They're like, why aren't you just like lying? Why are you saying what is like already the official policy? Why are you openly admitting that? Like, why can't you just lie to us and whisper sweet nothings into our ear? I wanted to clarify, I'm an Indian HasanAbi head too. The racist comments were referring to some of the chats about the interpreters' accents and why Modi doesn't speak English. Modi does speak English. Many Indians speak English, Modi included. He just doesn't speak English in that official setting, I suspect. Modi probably speaks better English than like 50% of Americans. Most Indians speak better English than most Americans. India is the largest English-speaking country on the planet. Okay, you are reaching. I mean, Modi speaks significantly worse English than his predecessors. Lots of Indian leaders don't speak English well, and that's fine. No, not the second largest. India is the largest English-speaking country on the planet. It's a second language, obviously. That's a reach. I'm sorry. Wait, what? No. I think there are more English. There's a larger English-speaking population in India, even though it is the second language. Or wait, is it total English speakers? No, not as a. I think there's more. I don't think this is correct. I think there's more English speakers in India. This is rigged. They're lying. They're lying and claiming that there's less Indians that speak English. I don't believe this. By total numbers, I thought India was the number one. Some dumbass just said British. It's British English, so it doesn't count. Okay, that wasn't a dumbass. That was correct. You were just given the facts. I don't believe it. Okay, it's fake news. Guess what? Figures are from the 2022 American Community Survey, 5-year estimates by the U.S. Census Bureau for persons ages up to 5 and older. 2024 estimate figures for population in first, second, and third languages. English as a first language is only spoken by 259,000 people, as a second language by 182 million, and as a third language by 45 million. It's not just British colonialization, by the way. English is used as a link language for all the ethnic groups of India, especially in South India. We all speak English to one another. We're thinking of China for the highest number of English speakers. No, it's not China, even though China does have a significant number of English as a second language speakers. I think it's it's not China at all. It's mixed. It is mixed. Plenty of Sri Lankan and Indian immigrants here in Japan speak either English or American English, depending on their home schools. When have you heard a fully Indian person from India in India speaking good English? What are you talking about? Yeah, but most of them are illiterate at it, just like everyone else's second language. I love when a fucking dumbass Westoid, who barely is legible, barely literate, is talking shit, okay? Is talking shit about Indian dudes in fucking India knowing like 4 languages off the rip, okay? Just fully letting their freak flag fly up in this bitch. Respect, dude. Jesus Christ. Oh, do they have an accent? I guess they're not literate then. That's what he means, by the way. It's that the dudes have an accent. So they're not actually literate in English. Law is such a weird hill to die on, Hasan. Why do you have to lie? About what? I mean, I'm memeing when I say it's India's number one in English speaking. I'll concede that I'm wrong on this, that America has more English speakers than India does, for sure. But as far as like an impressive number of Indians speaking English, like that is just the fact. Also, Yeah, why do you think the H-1B visa conversation is about like Indian tech workers? What the fuck? Why do you think? It's because a shit ton of Indians speak English. The list with the first, second language is the list with the first, second, third language speakers is India, US, Pakistan, Nigeria, Philippines. Damn, Pinoy gang, rise up. According to available data, around 12% of the Indian population speaks English. It is important to note that English is not the first language for the majority of Indians. It is primarily spoken as a second language. No, English is not the most spoken language in India. Hindi is the language with the most significant number of speakers, making 43.63% of the population. However, English remains an important language in India as an official language and is widely used in education and politics. If you ever watch code tutorial videos in Hindi, you can understand like half of the video because they switch back and forth from Hindi to English so much. Robin Banks, thank you for the 10 gifted subs, by the way. That Hindi statistic is also misleading. It's not actually 46%. Hold on. Doors open. Hindu nationalists are fudging the numbers. I can see that. The Hindi statistic is also misleading. It's not actually 46%. It's much lower than that. The Indian government just calls a bunch of languages Hindi. That makes sense. I can see that. All right, let's get back to Vladimir Zelensky.
That this is an important signal to the world, to the Russian leadership, that we stand together.
But back in D.C., Trump was non-committal when asked if he viewed Zelensky as an equal partner in negotiations with him and Putin.
What do you say to people who think that Trump is a Russian/Putin's puppet? I say to them that they should keep believing that, because then they won't recognize that he is actually Xi Jinping's puppet. You had wrong information. Modi did not finish school, bro. That's why he doesn't speak English. And if you look at literacy rates in India, it varies by a wide margin on a state-to-state basis. Even those Indians study English throughout school, verbal communication through English is very bad. I'm saying this as a South Indian. You had wrong information.
It's an interesting question. I think they have to make peace. Their people are being killed, and I think they have to make peace.
The White House yesterday revealed more details about the deal that led to the release of American schoolteacher Mark Fogel from a Russian prison. In exchange, we now know the Trump administration has agreed to send convicted money launderer Alexander Vinnik back to Russia. Vinnik was arrested in 2017 on charges of fraud using cryptocurrency. Tony?
Nancy, thank you very much.
Vladimir Putin responds to strength. In 2014, he invaded Crimea, not during the presidency of Donald Trump. Over 4 years, there was no Russian aggression from 2016 to 2020. In 2022, Vladimir Putin took aggression on Ukraine. Once again, not while President Trump was president of the United States. So any suggestion that President Trump is doing anything other than negotiating from a position of strength is on its face ahistorical and false. So when you look at what he may have to give or take, what's in or what's out in those negotiations, we have the perfect deal maker at the table from a position of strength to deal with both Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. No one's going to get everything that they want, understanding who committed the aggression in the first place. But I challenge anyone else to think of a world leader at this moment who, with credibility and strength, could bring those two leaders to the table and forge a durable peace that ultimately serves the interests of Ukraine, stops the killing and the death, which Trump has been clear he wants to do, and hopefully ultimately is guaranteed by strength of Europeans who are there prepared to back it up.
Why not invoke Article 5 then for the NATO peacekeeping forces that could potentially, how does that deter President Putin?
Well, I would say, I want to be clear about something as it pertains to NATO membership not being a realistic outcome for negotiations. That's something that was stated as part of my remarks here, as part of a coordination with how we're executing these ongoing negotiations, which are led by President Trump. All of that said, these negotiations are led by President Trump. Everything is on the table in his conversations with Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. What he decides to allow or not allow is at the purview of the leader of the free world, of President Trump. So I'm not going to stand at this podium and declare what President Trump will do or won't do, what will be in or what will be out, what concessions will be made or what concessions are not made. I can look, as our team has, of what's realistic, likely on an outcome. I think realism is an important part of the conversation that hasn't existed enough inside conversations amongst friends. But simply pointing out realism, like the borders won't be rolled back to what everybody would like them to be in 2014, is not a concession to Vladimir Putin. It's a recognition of hard power realities on the ground after a lot of investment and sacrifice, first by the Ukrainians and then by allies, and then a realization that a negotiated peace is going to be some sort of demarcation that neither side wants. But it's not my job as the Secretary of Defense to define the parameters of the President of the United States.
Wait, what? Isn't it literally his job?
Complex and consequential negotiations in the world.
So, Sean, on this problem for NATO, and it clearly is a problem, will they be reassured by what people...
It definitely is a part of his job. What the fuck? Nah, it's definitely a part of your job, man. No, he is a Fox News anchor. Okay, well, that remains true. Although he is a Fox News anchor, first and foremost, like, as it stands, as the secretary, as the head of the Defense Department, it's definitely a part of his job. Damn. Well, this is what happens in a DEI-free zone, you know? Thank God we abolished DEI so we could put competent and effective leadership in charge so that they could say stuff like, oh, it's not my job, it's the job of the president, who is the glorious supreme leader.
Pete Hegseth was saying that America remains committed to NATO.
One of the things that when I was listening through that, you can't help picking out that actually Pete Hegseth was making great...
I'm not saying the Defense Department is supposed to be making these decisions independent of the executive. I'm just simply stating that it definitely, when you communicate things like that, it comes across as though you have already had these conversations with the executive and you're just, you know, mentioning what the position of the leadership looks like, which I suspect he did anyway. And now he's just kind of falling on the proverbial sword because people are yelling at the admin. So yelling works. I mean, yelling is definitely worse to a certain degree with this administration that responds to negativity.
Overtures to say how strong he thought NATO was, how he committed to NATO, and President Trump was, because European leaders have been a little bit worried about whether Trump is going to walk away from it. But he was absolutely clear. Though he majored on this money side, he mentioned on the defence industrial base that had to be there. I'm less worried about the 5% number that was going out there. President Trump's famous for stretching the elastic band pretty hard. And actually, even when he was asked about that in the news conference, he backpedaled about 5% and said, America's spending a lot more than this. But I suspect 3% is the actual number. The trouble is I'm a veteran of the Cold War, and however much the European nations may worry about a number that's north of 2.5%, we were spending over 4% in the Cold War, and it feels like a more dangerous world. And we've had 35 years of not spending. So I think that message resonates, and we've still got, his point is, there's still a third of NATO members that are failing to pay the 2%. And what I think we're getting closer to is the point at which Mark Rutte has to turn around and go, you either pay or you don't enjoy the benefits. If you're not going to pay your premiums, you can't enjoy the benefits that NATO membership provides.
Right, and just briefly on Ukraine itself, are they right to be worried that a deal could be done over their heads that involves giving away chunks of their territory?
I'm less worried about that at the moment because it's not entirely clear what President Trump's role is in this. America is not at war with Russia. Russia is at war with Ukraine. So what is exactly that actually he's negotiating with President Putin? I think one of the things will be he wants to distance himself from President Biden. He wants to say NATO's off the table, because Putin was clearly worried about NATO getting closer to Russia's border. And he also said that the issue of territory probably was an unrealistic ambition. And although everybody gasps at that...
These guys also always play catch-up, just like the rest of the world. Like, why was this never a point of contention or a point of consideration when Biden was president? Like, what? All of a sudden now they're like, oh, well, for Vladimir Putin, NATO was always off the table. Okay. Why are you saying that now? Was that not the case initially? I don't understand.
Most recent conversations that Sky's had with President Zelensky have turned around.
I know you're against Trump and Elon, but why is auditing the government seen as a bad thing? Because that's not what they're doing, okay? If you think that they're, quote unquote, auditing the government to find like wasteful expenditures and fraud, you've fallen into the marketing campaign that isn't even like that good, really. Why is it that so many people refuse critical thinking or the very simple notion that your government officials, no matter what their background is, are most likely fucking lying to you when it's a goddamn Republican in charge? Everybody understands this reality when it's the fucking Democrats, but for some stupid reason, no one ever understands that the government officials have the capacity to lie to you just as the Democrats do when it's the goddamn Republicans doing it. All of the free thinkers, dude. This is before we consider that there's already a pre-existing service that audits the government regardless and is way better equipped at finding inefficiencies than a bunch of random dudes who are 19 years old on Adderall, fucking keyword searching woke and DEI and just hitting delete.
And said, look, he doesn't think that's reasonable. What I was a little bit concerned about was that Trump seems to have given away a few of his negotiating cards already. And I suspect that, you know, President Trump has been making big overtures about Panama Canal, about Greenland, about Israel and Gaza. I suspect we've got to look beyond the rhetoric. And all of this, I suspect, is just using it as America focusing on China, UK and the EU sort out the continent.
On Russian state television, the tone was triumphant. An historic shift in relations was how this anchor described the phone call. Another told viewers to feel the difference. But officially, at least, Moscow's not celebrating yet. Russia's foreign minister even suggested the world has overreacted.
I was struck by the fact that the entire world has fallen into a kind of stupor. They were stunned when a normal, basic conversation between two well-mannered, polite people took place.
It's not that polite to invade your neighbour, but it seems Vladimir Putin will be rewarded, securing concessions on territory and NATO membership before peace talks have even begun. And then there's the prospect of another face-to-face meeting. Helsinki before, Saudi Arabia next, we're told, and then possibly Moscow. If Donald Trump does come to Moscow, it would be a very big win indeed for the Kremlin. Because ever since Russia invaded Ukraine nearly 3 years ago, the West has sought to isolate Vladimir Putin and cast him as a pariah. But the image of him shaking hands with the American president here in the Russian capital would shatter that altogether. Plenty to chew over then at Moscow's California diner, where opinions are split on how many should be at the table.
Well, it doesn't depend on only two presidents. There should be at least three sides. The other side should also agree to this.
I am for negotiations. I really like that at least bridges are being built for these negotiations. And I think that it is very useful for everyone.
Ukraine would beg to differ. Fast food and fast diplomacy is not to everyone's tastes. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.